All right, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday morning Bible class, slightly different edition. So we are not doing John's Gospel today. Instead, we have a very special treat here. I don't know if you have met him yet, but the man to my right, Pastor Kent Reeder, he has been serving up at our mission church, Elum, in Seattle. He got out here in 2019.
That's right.
2019. He graduated from our seminary in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 2013?
2013.
2013. Mm-hmm. His birthday is, I don't know your birthday, but about 7 years older than I am, and we're blessed to serve together out here with about 10 other pastors here in the area, and yet the opportunity arose at one of our recent work parties where Pastor Reeder said, hey, I'd love a chance to come to the other churches and talk a little bit about Elum, if you would ever have me. And I said, well, what about today? And he said, sounds good to me. So I will turn it over to him to share with us a little bit about... Yep, all good. So I hand it over to Pastor Reeder to tell us a little bit about our efforts at Elum in Seattle. So
thanks.
The floor is yours. Thank you.
We go till about 10 usually.
You should be fine.
Or sooner, but
Well, I'll finish by 11, I promise. Good morning. Hello. I am Kent, and I've met a couple of you. Yeah, I'm recognizing some faces. But what are you called here? The esteemed Reverend Pastor Chris Royce said, I'm up in Seattle. That's my wife, Alex, over there. She is also in Seattle with me, and our son, Beck, is over at Sunday school. This won't be just an infomercial. We will actually talk about the Bible as well, I promise. But we will, I do want to, you'd mentioned, just talk about the mission and what we're doing and how we're approaching things a little bit. I did this at a bunch of our Wells churches in the region in 2019, and we had all these plans, and then the whole world changed in 2020, and all of our plans have changed as well. So it's sort of like a good time to say, hey, this is what we're actually going to do. I'm definitely right this time. We definitely won't change it. No, I have nothing to, I have no real concrete, because the Lord just holds those things as He will. But I do want to give you some information about what we're doing and how we're approaching it. It is in Seattle. I titled the presentation, What's Going On in Seattle, because I think people ask that question every once in a while for all kinds of different reasons, whether it was like during the pandemic when there were the protests and it was like, what's going on in Seattle? Or afterwards, now the tendency is for there to be headlines about homelessness or about the changing of businesses in downtown. People ask, what's going on in Seattle? Well, there's a lot of things going on in Seattle. It's a metro area of over 4 million people. So, of course, there's going to be a lot that's going on there. But there are some really good things going on there, one of which is Elum, this mission. And we're really excited about what we get to do. But there had been a church in Seattle, a Wells church in Seattle. Maybe some of you were familiar with it. It was called Grace. Grace was there for a long time, 1941. Grace started, and in 2017, meaningfully, Grace closed. And there are a lot of reasons that happened, and we are a restart out of that and out of the work that was done up in Edmonds as well, at Salem Lutheran Church up in Edmonds. Both of those closed in 2017. And they closed for a number of reasons, but Seattle is different. Like, what's going on in Seattle? How does one go about ministering in a place like this that moves as quickly as this, where there's as much transience as there is in a major city, where people have never really meaningfully been churched? Seattle is about 15% churched. Before I was in Seattle, was in South Carolina, in a city called Rock Hill. Rock Hill was 85% churched. It was just a full flip. It's a whole different thing. And so we've decided, and we've been given the opportunity, because of the generosity of the synod and the situation we find ourselves in at Elum, to try some things that'll be a little bit different. And I want to do some explaining of those. And that's where the quick vocabulary primer comes in. So if we can scroll a little bit, you don't have to read all these words, I'll talk about them. But there are some terms that we use at Elum that matter. One of which is Elum Network. It's the first one you see there. Elum Network is sort of like an umbrella organization over a bunch of stuff stuff that we're trying to do in Seattle, one of the things that we're trying to do is Elum Church, right? Obviously, we want to minister to people using God's word, using the sacraments in a way that helps them. But the network is a beneficial thing for us to have. It's actually our official legal name. Like if you're trying to look us up on the Washington Secretary of State website, Elum Network is the name that you should look up, and you will find our DBAs and everything underneath there. And that's because we're not just doing the church, but if you'll scroll up now, this is, of course, a church. We are a ministry. We exist to help people understand that God loves them. He sent his son to die for them. He invites them into his family unconditionally through the word and the sacraments. This is what we are doing. There's a couple realities of that, though. It's free. Jesus' love is completely, totally, and entirely free. We don't charge people when we're telling them about Jesus. We don't charge them for baptisms. We don't charge them for the Lord's Supper. We give them the opportunity to give and to support what we're doing. But the growth of that effort is not fast in a city like Seattle. We don't expect to suddenly balloon to 500 people or 1,000 people. We expect it to be a slow, long job that takes time. Will affect and connect with a lot of people, a ton of people, because we're in a very dense city. We meet people all the time. We had a couple of work parties. Some of you kind folks came up for those work parties over the course of the summer, and you saw, I gave 40 tours a day during those work parties. People were just coming into our building, seeing what we were doing. I was telling them all about it. We touch a lot of people, but you don't reach financial sustainability via offerings in an inner city mission very quickly. So we have to function in some other ways, and we are trying to do that, which allows us to scroll down to a couple other things. There is one thing called Elum Coffee. We actually had started a coffee stand at our previous location, which was the Grace Lutheran Church location. That location is now for sale. We bought a different building. I'll explain that in a little bit. But we had started an actual coffee stand there. We intend to have a full-on coffee house in our new location. We're working on that, renovating towards that now. That'll bring people on campus. Our new building is across the street from a Seattle public elementary school, so hundreds of parents a day are walking their kids there, and we assume that after the coffee house is open, they will then come over and have a coffee and a pastry and hang out, and I will talk to them, and we will get to know them, and we will build reputation. They'll start to learn Christians aren't scary people, and churches aren't scary places, at least a little bit, and some of them. All right? So that's coffee. Also in that building, there is this space that's been redone as kind of an office space that was used as a co-working space for 2017 through the beginning of the pandemic. So a co-working space is where anybody can rent an office space or a desk in it, and they can come and they can use that. So they successfully had one in that building already. We are going to have one, we call it Elum Office, that will particularly focus on serving nonprofits and not just giving them space, but giving them services, helping incubate nonprofit activity in our neighborhood and in our region in ways that benefit it. So we are seeking out and will continue to seek out local nonprofits or just folks who have causes in their hearts but don't have any idea how to legally start a 501c3 or how to do some of the basic stuff you need to do to see that cause get brought through. I have some experience in this in a couple different ways. That lead me to want to be a part of this. My church in South Carolina and our church here in Seattle, we prioritize community service at a very high level, like worship, education, and community service, equally important discipleship pieces as we seek to engage people in spiritual maturation processes. And so I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, and I've seen them start. For example, I had a young woman, she was a 19-year-old girl in our church in South Carolina who was murdered, and it was really tragic. It was awful, and it was a crazy time and a crazy thing. And I was working with her mother, who was a member of my church, as was the young woman, and we were processing the grief and figuring it out. And out of that came this organization called Carson's Compassion Project, which now does a whole bunch of things in Rock Hill, South Carolina every year. And I watched that process, how that organization was born and grew and became a legal entity. And I've seen that happen more than once. So we can help people who have causes do things. And not only that, we have members, right? Elum is a church. Elum as a church has members. We have human beings who are looking for ways to serve. So why not partner with a bunch of young, new nonprofits, give them a bunch of volunteer people, and give our people the chance to self-sacrificially give to their community in ways that are beneficial. So that's Elum Office that will derive revenue for us too, because we'll rent out those office spaces. Elum Venue is how we use the building for concerts and weddings and all kinds of different events that'll be happening. We're having a concert on December 18th already, a band out of Nashville called Jenny and Tyler coming up. They're great. If you're not familiar with Jenny and Tyler, I would highly recommend that you put them into your regular Pandora or Spotify or whatever listening rotation. But they'll be just the first of what we hope to be lots of interesting kinds of events or ways that the building can be used as a venue. I just had a conversation this week with a woman who coordinates music lessons. She just has like dozens of piano and violin teachers that she works with who need spaces. So we've got all these little spaces, these offices, and they can be rented. Let's bring them in. Let's make after-school stuff happen for these families. The last thing on there is a little bit different. It's called the Great City Network. I don't know if you guys have heard of this yet, but the Great City Network is an organization that not just Elum, but also Savior of the Nations up in Vancouver, the Wells Church up in Vancouver, helped to start. And it's designed to develop for the Wisconsin Synod a vocabulary of city ministry. How do we do churches in cities? I don't know if you know the history, but there was a point, maybe 75 years ago or so, when the Wisconsin Synod and the Missouri Synod, these two Lutheran church bodies, were working together very closely. And Wisconsin said to Missouri, you know what? You do the cities. We'll take the rural areas and the small towns. You handle the cities. And that's fine if we're working together, but then in the late 60s, we stopped working together. But we never developed a methodology for cities. We're really good in suburban areas and we're really good in rural areas, but we don't really have a vocabulary for cities. So the Great City Network is our attempt at developing how does it look to create ministry that happens in urban places, in very dense city centers where it's quite different. I'll pause at this point. Hello, everybody who has come in while I was just monologuing about the things that Elum is and is attempting to do. Are there any questions at this point that I can answer in less than a minute and a half? Yes.
Well, you indicated it's out in the Ravenna area.
Yeah.
So you're not in central Seattle, you're out.
We are adjacent to the University of Washington campus. That's where this building is. Yep, so it's over in Ravenna. We can see from there's 3 stories to this church that we bought. It's a 100-year-old church, big brick church building. You can see the Husky Stadium from right up there.
University Village.
We're right by University Village, yes. Yep.
What happened to the property at Grace?
It is presently for sale. So we have 2 interested parties at the moment. We have committed, at this point at least, to not selling to a developer. We don't want it to get torn down and turned into like just some condos or whatever. So church or school type groups are who we've been courting, and that's who we're looking at right now. So I think if I was to guess today, what will happen is it'll get purchased by a group that is going to have a German school, like a German immersion school in it, as well as a church on the weekends that will rent it out. And the parsonage will be part of that as well. Yep. All right. Let's talk about then this building. I've got some pictures for you so we can show you some of the things we're going to do with this facility that we have. So if we can scroll into these. This is the sanctuary space in the building that we bought. These are renders. It doesn't look, don't worry, those of you who came up for the workday, we're not this far yet. Not even close. Not even close to this far yet. You're looking at the back of it, actually. So that big window is in the, like, what would be the back of the room. The furniture that's like right at the base of that, that's the coffee bar. So that sanctuary space will also be the coffee house. So that's where the baristas will work and do their thing. And you're seeing the chairs set up as though it's like for an event like this. this, a concert or a church service or whatever that may be. It's a great space. You've been up there, you've seen it. Like, it's got this wonderful vaulted ceiling and just a lot of good things going for it. It was built in 1923, so we bought it at its 100th anniversary. So it's like, here's to another 100 years is the kind of idea as we talk about it. Let's keep scrolling. You get a top view for how it would be set up if we were looking at having an event that's kind of turned. So that's, you see the coffee bar on the left, the stage on the right, and then there'll be a screen that's there. So that's one way that as a venue it could work if there were a speaker, if there was something else going on. Let's keep going. You can keep scrolling. Okay. This is how it might be set up for the cafe version of things during the week, right? Got the coffee stuff on the left. People would come in the upper left corner is where the entrance to that space is, and they can hang out and they can do their thing. It's notable that this area up here, that's another room. That's like part of the cafe, but you kind of got to go out and around and up some stairs. It kind of overlooks the whole sanctuary space. It's where the organ pipes used to be, like 30 years ago before they sold the organ. So it's this really neat overlook kind of room that's up there. All right, let's keep going. That's it from the side. You can see the windows, you can see it, but you also get a good view of the downstairs in this cross section. There's a whole giant room in the basement that's pretty much just as large as the sanctuary space, and it has its own stage. So think of it as like for example, a wedding. Like, you could have your wedding upstairs, and then you could go downstairs and have your reception, and it would work very nicely, because if you had the right number of guests for the upstairs, you'll have the right number of guests for the downstairs as well. It should work out pretty nicely. And then there's auxiliary spaces that you're not seeing. I think there's like maybe one or two more pictures. Let's keep going. So there you get to see the basement better. You see the view of the stage. It's a cut cross section, of course. And you also, on the right side of this, can see in the second level there the co-working space. Sorry to the people watching on video. That's where those offices are. And then there's more offices upstairs, but we'll probably use those as offices for us and for our staff. And then here's the view of the sanctuary from the other side. So you can see that upper overlook space. You can see where we will put our screen and everything as we use this overall room. So it's a lovely building. It's like I said, it's an old brick building, 100 years old. It's going to take a bunch of work. We hope to be done by midsummer. With the renovations that are going on, we'll have more work days coming up in March, April, and May, so don't worry. Give you guys more opportunities to come up and be there. But I think it's going to work pretty nicely, and it should be able to have lots of people every day coming in, going out, rubbing shoulders with our people, and making a whole bunch of connections in the neighborhood. It also meets our kind of Elum's philosophy of how a facility is best used, which is as a gift to the neighborhood. Every person who walks by, who I talk about, what do you want out of this? What would you like to see? What would benefit you? I once heard a group of moms, when we were first looking at the building, I was there to meet the realtor, and there were some moms walking. They had just dropped their kids off in the morning. They were walking by, and they were talking about, how could we buy this building and turn it into a public pool? And that's not realistic at all. But let's talk about other good things we can do with this building for you. And over, if we get to tell this story to people, we're coming to the neighborhood, we're building you a gift. We're creating something that is designed to make this neighborhood stronger and healthier and better. A place for families, a place for individuals, a place for people to be together and to be community. That resonates. No one's mad about us doing that. Plus, we get to say we're keeping a historic building there. We may even apply for landmark status as things goes along, and that'll make people even more excited about it. Now, does that save anybody's soul? No. Does that change anybody's mind about Jesus or about God or about their sinfulness? No. But does it make us one step closer to having an important conversation? It does. It gives us a reputation of generosity, of unconditionality. It shows that we are living the way that Jesus lived toward us, and that is our goal and our desire. What's going on in Seattle? I've talked about a bunch of technical stuff so far that's going on in Seattle, but the other thing I want to do today, with you this morning is, if we scroll down, is show you how we do what we actually do. I think it's probably going to be best, Dan, if you click on the word like Elum or the embed word that's there at the top. Yeah, if you hit that, that. This will open in its own window then. That'll be great. Okay. And then I'll have you do two other things. If you'll hit the little full screen arrows that are in the far corner over there underneath the login button, down. There's those two arrows pointed opposite. Yeah, hit that. Good. And then if you do that command plus thing a couple times so our text gets larger, that'll be superb. There it is. Look at that. Thank you, Dan. All right. So what's going on in Seattle? There's that. Like, that's all the administrative stuff, the church starting stuff, the facility management stuff that we're doing. It's kind of different. It's a different approach to how you would use a facility, and it's weird for a mission church to get to do this right away. But we get to. We get to do this experiment. We're excited about it. But how do we actually go about doing ministry? An example of this question is, how is it that I am here with you today, this morning, despite being a mission pastor in Seattle? How does it work that, what are my people doing? Well, we don't actually meet on Sunday mornings at the moment. That isn't happening at Elum, and that's a thing that's all right within our model. It works for us because we don't really get all of our people together every single week into one space. The model of ministry that we have decided to work with and use at this point in Seattle is one in which we have taken our people and we have divided them into small groups, and we add new people into whatever small group works for them. And the small groups get together every single week at a time and at a place. That place might be the internet, that place might be somebody's house, that place might be that building that I just showed you, it might be our old building. It doesn't really matter. They can meet anywhere that they have the internet, because what they do as a group is they walk through one of these things, which is called a spotlight. A spotlight is how we deliver God's word to our people. I make one of these each week. Our people walk through it together on Sunday evenings and Monday mornings and Tuesday evenings and Wednesday evenings and whenever else our groups are meeting. So I want to do one of these with you, or at least a portion of one with you this morning. But you kind of have to be in small groups for it to work. So be with some other people who you can talk to. You guys over there are maybe more isolated than I would like you to be. So if I could get you to come be with some other people, that'd be great. You as well, ma'am, if I could get you to move near some other people, that'd be swell. I'm going to make my wife move also. So you got to be in small groups to do this, because it's designed for small groups. And there's not... there's a lot of reasons that we do this, but here's the thing. There's 4 million people in the city of Seattle, and yet it is the loneliest city in America by some measurements, right? You're surrounded by people all the time. They're constantly around you. You can't go to a Starbucks without standing in line for 10 minutes, and yet these people are lonely. That's because loneliness is not the same. Loneliness, or anti-loneliness, or feeling together, is not the same as being in proximity with other people, right? The opposite of loneliness is actually being with other people, being actually vulnerable with other people. And we want this for people. And so we've decided to put all of our chips on a version of things that put people in a place together and give them opportunities, safe opportunities, optional opportunities. We're not going to force anybody to do anything they're not comfortable with, but opportunities to be honest and vulnerable. That's hard to do in a room that's even got this many people in it, right? Like, it'd be hard to raise your hand and share a real thing, a tough thing that's going on in your life in a group that's this large. But in a group of 6 or 10 or even 15, but boy, that's getting to be too big, you can share, especially if you've been with that group over and over for the course of 6 weeks and a year and even more, right? You develop these relationships. And what we want is Christian community where people can hold each other, where they can care honestly for one another. But they can't care honestly for each other if they're not honestly sharing what they need with one another. So the spotlight's meant to kind of do this. So it always starts with a welcome section. That's what you have here. And there's an icebreaker at the beginning just for while the group is getting together and sitting down or joining the Zoom room or whatever they're doing. This week's icebreaker from this one, this is a long past spotlight, was what is the best dessert? There is a right answer. Would anyone like to guess what it is? Cheesecake. No, I'm sorry. No, right, that's the fun thing about it, is icebreakers are always just this way. You can't get it wrong unless you lie, unless you say something you don't actually believe. It just gets the conversation going. It doesn't really thematically, in this case, connect with what we're going to talk about. That's the icebreaker. If we scroll down a little bit, this next yellow panel that's here is just how you get into it, how you get started. So if a person's logging in, they need to join the Zoom call, or we have like an app and everything so they can log into the app or they can log into their account. So we know they're there and all that. We can do that. So let's keep going from there. That's just front matter business. Then there is the focus of the thing. So we're in a series right now that's called On Letting the Light Shine. That's what that big image is going to say, if you could see the whole thing. And if you click on Focus 3 Summary, the focus is simple. We can't make the light shine, but we can interact with it shining. This is what we're going to talk about today in the Spotlight. Through all the sections, that's going to be the theme. It's what's going to drive the conversation forward, okay? So you can X out of that. You can keep scrolling down. Let's talk about the 72-hour mirror. Is there going to be audio? Like if you push play on that? Okay, let's find out.
I'm Kent, and I have a question.
It's me.
What would you do if you had 72 hours to see? Helen Keller, who famously, though being blind and deaf, learned to communicate and to reach out and to speak and to inspire many people despite her disability, proposed this question many years ago. And as she did so, she was trying to help those who read her words understand and consider the blessing of being able to see. She wanted to explore what it would be like to see as a blind person for just 72 hours and how carefully she would invest those hours. As she described her opportunity, she started with people. For the first day, she would want to see and explore and understand and appreciate the faces of those people that had been there for her, those who had influenced and impacted her, those who had cared about her and loved her and educated her. On the second day, she wanted to see the sunrise and the world as it turns, to see the beauty of nature and the power of all that goes on around her. She wanted to see and appreciate what had been made, what she interacted with on a day-to-day basis, and understand what it looked like while it interacted with her. And on the third day, she wanted to see everyday life, to walk through the work, to walk through the lives and homes and relationships, to walk through the schools and streets of New York City, and finally understand what all this sound and movement and life looked like. Helen Keller was able, because she couldn't see and couldn't hear and couldn't experience a lot of what was around her, to help millions of people who read her words appreciate eyes and what they mean. Help them think about what it looks like to really value and appreciate and invest the eyes that you've been given, to use them to their fullest. And today, it's worth it for you to think about that, to consider the ways that your eyes allow you to do some incredible things, the way they allow you to relate to other human beings and look them in the eye. Allow me to pray for you about this. Lord, you've given us eyes to see, and by these eyes, we can interact with one another and get to know one another in deep and significant ways. You see us perfectly. You look deeply into our hearts. You look straight into our eyes. You appreciate everything that you see. Help us to do the same to you, to the people around us, even to ourselves, to see and appreciate and relate, and to prioritize using our eyes to love and understand those who are around us, as we have been loved and understood by you. Amen.
So that's the introduction. Starts with that. That kind of gets the group's focus all together. They're listening to the same thing. They're hearing it. They pray together. And then it moves into the next portion of the welcome thing. Learn the colors of your friend's eyes. In the article 3 Days to See, which was described in the audio clip, Helen Keller talks about an experiment she often performs. Now, the question for you is, can you accurately describe the faces of 5 good friends? Some of you can, many cannot. As an experiment, I have questioned husbands of long standing about the color of their wives' eyes, and often they express embarrassed confusion and admit that they do not know. All right, give me a husband who raises his hand. What's your wife's eye color? Nice, well done, good job. Follow these steps to complete this exercise. Without looking, if you're doing the spotlight in a group, which you guys are in your groups, jot down the eye color of the other members of the group, even the ones that might not have been able to make it today. So the idea would be that the group, without looking at each other, now has to say, all right, so Jim's eyes are, well, I don't know, orange. And, like, they have to guess it. The point, of course, being you probably don't know it. And maybe somebody knows, right? Maybe somebody knows. Then you see how you did. You share your eye color with your group so everyone can check their answers. What 2 things does this accomplish for us in the spotlight? There's 2 big things that happen with this exercise.
You're interacting and talking and getting to know the people around you.
It's like a literal way that you get to know the people better. You learn their eye color through this activity. That's the real dream, right? I don't really, concepts are good. We need to know ideas and concepts and theological truths. That's good. But those things are all means to an end, which is that we can connect better, that we can live in harmony with one another in ways that we couldn't before. Obviously, the other thing it does is it makes this point. We take our eyes for granted. We don't use them in the ways that we could. So we keep going. Why the embarrassment at not knowing each other's eye color? Anybody know the movie Enchanted? I love this movie so much. There's a line. Does he wear his favorite color just so he can match your eyes? Oh, that's very romantic. His favorite color is your eye color. Is the implication? It's so good. Anyway, keep going. Blue. He's wearing blue. He's wearing blue. It's not a big deal if you haven't paid attention to the eye color of your group members, but it's definitely impressive if a group member is paying that kind of attention. In other words, while you don't typically expect someone to pay attention to the color of your eyes, it seems to mean something if they do. Helen Keller wrote about husbands expressing embarrassed confusion when asked about the eye color of their wives. Put it into words, why exactly does a husband get embarrassed when he doesn't know his wife's eye color? Yeah, it's not true, but it makes an implication about his appreciation of these eyes that he's hopefully stared into for a long period of time. And so he gets embarrassed. It's just a reminder. Each section of the spotlight then ends with a perspective. So the welcome perspective here is opening your eyes is only valuable if you plan to see. There are 5 sections to every spotlight. We start with welcome, and then we move to worship. So if you'll click on this arrow here, and I'm real bummed about where they put our little chat thing. I didn't, because that happens all the time. You got to move over just a touch, and then you should be able to get it. There, you got it. All right, then we go into the worship section of the spotlight. So we start by introducing the concept and welcome, and then in the worship section, my goal is something along the lines of spiritual rest for you. This isn't necessarily like where you're getting challenged. It's not where you're getting pushed. It's not where you're having to do like a bunch of growing. This is where God takes you up into his arms, and he says, it's going to be okay. I've got you, and I love you, and I'll hold you. And the German word for worship, does anybody know what it was? It still is the German. The one that our Lutheran concept of worship came out of, the word is Gottesdienst, and it's a word that means God's service. That doesn't mean our service of God. It means his service of us. So when we talk about baptism, God comes down through the water, and he does the washing. We talk about the Lord's Supper. God comes to you in the bread and wine, and he does the connecting and the forgiving in that. God comes to us and does does work. It's one of the most unique pieces of Lutheran theology out there, right? Most other theologies of worship are theologies in which the people come to God and they serve him, kind of like the picture of the temple, bringing your sacrifices and doing the thing that he's requiring of you. That's not how we do it. So our worship sections are meant to be restful for people. So here's how this one goes. Thank God for your eye color and many more things about yourself. God will always get the eye color question right for every person. He loves in a way that pays attention. Psalm 139 confesses the truth of this beautifully. Read/pray these verses together. If you can see them well enough to read them with me, please do so. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So the group reads that together, and it's a simple sort of opportunity to pray and meditate. Observe and discuss how and why God opens people's eyes. We're going to kind of skip over this activity here, but the way that this would work is the groups would subdivide into probably pairs or groups of 3. And I've got 4 sections of Scripture, Genesis 21, Numbers 22. Each one of them has literally the phrase, God opened their eyes, right? Like in the story of Balaam and the donkey, God opens his eyes so that he can see the angel, opens the donkey's eyes so he can see the angel. In the story of Elijah and his guy, he opens his eyes so that they can see the army that's around them, right? Like each one is a story of God opening eyes so that people can see something that they need when they need to see it, right? This is what eyes are for. They can perceive something that's there. So after they look through each of these stories and they ask the question, why does God open the eyes? There is an internal thing. Ask yourself what you need to see. In the stories above, people sincerely needed to see something that would change their lives. From the physical to the spiritual to the emotional, God opened their eyes and helped them see something significant. The idea of eyes being opened isn't always this positive, though. We have that happen in the Genesis story, right? Right after Adam and Eve eat the fruit, their eyes are opened, and they realize they are naked, so they sew fig leaf coverings for themselves. That's what happens there in the last verse. These verses recount mankind becoming sinful. That is, they show what happened with people who stopped seeing the way God had created them to see and started to see in a different, selfish way. Neither Adam nor Eve liked the way their spouse was looking at them anymore, so they covered themselves up. Humanity has been doing this ever since. It's a marked change. It's not as though Adam and Eve were not naked before they ate the fruit. They were naked. It's not as though they couldn't see each other before they ate the fruit. They could see each other. What changed is Eve didn't like the way Adam was looking at her anymore, and Adam didn't like the way Eve was looking at him anymore. They were separated from each other. They were able to objectify one another, turn the other person's body into an object for their own benefit. And so they said, no more of that. We're going to cover ourselves up. And they did. In this series, this is the third part of a series, we've been thinking about the ways light allows you to see and relate with people around you. It's a wonderful idea, but it's also painful to see the ways that darkness blinds the people God's made to one another. With all this in mind, we're praying today that God will open your eyes to see the love that's supposed to be there. And then they would listen to this song, See the Love by the Brilliance. We're not going to do it today, but it is a brilliant music video because they just walk through busy city streets as you listen to this song. I want to see the love that's all around me. And you're seeing just all of these people. And you can look at that in a lot of ways, but you can walk through busy city streets desiring simply to see love, looking for where love exists as you're walking around. And it really does change what you're seeing. And then there's the worst perspective at the bottom. God opens our eyes and shows us what it looks like to love what we see. If you keep going, I probably won't do the next sections, but the other three sections are going to be a learn section, a serve section, and a farewell section. In the learn section, my goal for the people is to really get pushed, right? Learn sections, I say, are like going to the gym. If worship is rest, I want you to lie down and take a spiritual nap in the arms of your Father. In the learn section, I would like you to go to a spiritual gym. You have to think, you have to talk, you have to share, like you got to work out for this to be beneficial. Tear up your muscles a little bit so that they grow. It's good to have bigger spiritual muscles through a safe environment where you can work them out. That's the learn section. But if all you ever do as a Christian is rest and go to the gym and rest and go to the gym and rest, you might have big spiritual muscles, but no one's going to like you because you don't help people move their couches. What people want from strong people is they want you to come help them move their couch when they're moving. So that's what community service does. Our section after the serve section is the serve section. How do we actually take these muscles that we've gained and use them in active ways that benefit the people around us? And then in the farewell section, it's a very simple section. They always pray for each other, so there's a time for sharing prayer requests and a guide, kind of a prompt for how to pray for and with one another. And a closing song, we kind of rotate through just a few different closing songs so they become familiar, like Brothers, Sisters, Let Us Gladly is one, or Praise God from Whom All Blessings Flow is one of them. And that's it. The whole group has now walked together through this thing called the Spotlight. It takes about 90 minutes or so as they do this. So it's sort of everything all packed into one, all thematically related and connected. Groups do this each week. We come out with a new Spotlight each week, and they walk through these together. We do get our groups, all of our people together in a couple different ways. Right now, what we're doing is on the first Sunday of the month, we just bring everybody together on Sunday morning for communion. Like, we read a psalm. Somebody picks and reads a psalm, and we pray for each other, so everybody shares prayer requests. You have to, like it's a requirement at this event. You must share a prayer request that's going on in your life. And then we take communion together, and then we have breakfast. We cook up a big, good, delicious breakfast, and we all eat breakfast together. It's sort of like what the Christians did in the early Christian church in the first century, just getting together for that agape meal. It's just that portion of it. So we do that on the first Sunday of the month. That puts everybody in the same room. And then we do various other events. We were supposed to have a movie night this past Friday night, but our electricians got a little carried away, and without electricity, it's hard to have a movie night. So we postponed the movie night. We'll do that another day. But things like that, of course, also happen. At the end of the day, though, what we are doing is these groups doing these spotlights. Like, that's the model. That's what we push people towards. That's what I'm integrating UW students into as I meet new students, new members from the neighborhood, as we meet new people from the neighborhood. Get them into a good small group, help them make those relationships, make new small groups as we need to make new small groups so that they can function together and minister to them in that way. What's going on in Seattle in general? That's a picture of it. We've got this building, we've got this project, and all the things that are going to come along with that project. If you know people who are around Seattle who are event planners, who know stuff about like aftercare programs for kids, who are really great administrators, anything like that, like we're going to be hiring some of those kind of people over the course of the next 12 months. We'd be interested in meeting people if you know somebody. But what we're doing on the ministry side, I think, is what's truly exciting. Is what truly motivates us each day to help people be safe in communities of 5 to 15 folks who love them unconditionally and care for them and connect with them spiritually on a week-to-week basis. This is the thing that we're trying to do. Okay, so it's 10:01, which is what I was hoping it would be. I was hoping for 10 o'clock, so I'm a touch late. There's a couple things we could talk about still if we wanted to, but I'm predominantly interested in talking to you in your questions or thoughts or anything like that. So as we've walked through everything we've walked through today, do you have any particular questions? Go for it.
Who do you offer communion to?
So we have like a membership course, and as people integrate into the groups, I connect with them. The way that I've always talked about a membership course is it's how I become your pastor, right? So we go through this course together. We walk through these significant things that need to be understood, and if we walk through that and you're still okay with me and you're still okay with Elum, right? We've talked through these important spiritual realities, then you're a member, and those are the folks. So communion is not like a thing that we open up to everybody. It's that Sunday morning, first Sunday of the month event is really a very small internal event that's just for people who would agree with us theologically at a pretty high level, right? They've walked through that course and they know what's going on. We have a couple of significant others that come to that who like aren't members. They just don't commune at that. Like they come for breakfast and they come for the psalm, but they don't take the bread and the wine. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's the best dessert?
Well,
Thank you, Joe.
there's a couple good answers to this. There's one right one, and it's too broad to be a specific answer. It's just as long as it has peanut butter in it, it's the best dessert. My wife once made a cake. It was a really beautiful cake, and man, like had Reese's peanut butter cups like around the top of it, and like a chocolate, like what do you call that when you do that? Ganache over the top of it. It wasn't for me. It was for a coworker. Man, that looked like the best dessert ever. No, I'm kidding. She then made it for me as well. But if it has ice cream and peanut butter in it, it is the best dessert that there can be, in my opinion. But it's very subjective. Mm-hmm. At this point, we are really trying to avoid having to put an elevator in that building. So there's a lot of stairs. You've been there. There's a lot of stairs in the building. It's got 3 different levels and everything. We will add a chairlift that'll get people down to the basement and to the main level. I don't think we'll ever have handicap accessibility on the highest level of the building, at least at this point, which is fine. We can get away without that. We are trying very hard right now to avoid what's called substantial alteration territory. So if the city permit folks decide that you're doing too much to the building, then you have to bring everything up to code. Then we would get ourselves into a position where an elevator becomes a pretty serious part of the conversation, as does a significant capital campaign. So we'd rather, there's no good spot for an elevator in there. We've looked very hard at how that could be done. But the chairlift will make it accessible, which is important to us. We don't want to have an inaccessible building for people. Yeah.
You advertise yourself as a Lutheran church, like in your sign?
No, not in general. Elum is the thing that you see as a general rule. There are a couple reasons that we don't typically use the word Lutheran as part of our advertising. Number one is in Seattle, as it was in South Carolina too, when I say Lutheran to the average person, they think of the ELCA, and they think of how the ELCA functions, what the ELCA believes, and all of that, right? So we aren't like the ELCA. We don't believe a lot of the things the ELCA believes or preach in the same way the ELCA preaches. So I don't want that connection. Number two, I get the follow-up question if I do say that we're Lutheran, or when it comes up, so does that mean you're Christian? So what that says they're doing in their mind is they're saying, okay, so there's Christians and then there's Lutherans. Well, that's not true. Obviously, Lutherans are Christians. But if they're saying we're not, they're putting us into a bucket that Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses are in their mind. And that's another bucket that I very much want to avoid, or another association that I very much would like to avoid. And the third one tends to be, if they have experience with Lutheranism and they aren't currently a part of a Lutheran church, they left a Lutheran church. And I have to at least give myself a shot at reframing what Lutherans can be and look like for those folks who have in some way estranged themselves from their past with Lutheranism. Eventually, right, they start to understand that our theological grounding is coming out of and connected to what Martin Luther and the Lutheran Church Fathers of the 15 and 1600s wrote and said and taught. But at the beginning is too early, at least in our experience with evangelism, to use that kind of terminology. You're welcome to have a follow-up to that if you would like, though.
It's interesting that somebody said that. Let's think about that one.
Yeah. So. Yes. You're asking a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I think I took away a lot of strengths from what you talked about here today with Elum's ministry, and one that I really appreciate is like, Elum is making church like, just like the head-on encounters with other people that are happening at Elum on like whenever the groups meet. And there have been many church Sundays in my life, before this. I talk to pretty much everybody on Sunday now, right? Because by virtue of what I do, but there have been many Sundays where I walk into church at 7:57, I sit, I receive, I leave. And I don't really, conversations with other people, getting to, what is your eye color? I'll ask you how your week was, or like, what are you doing this week? But like,
But if you don't get the answer, fine, you're kind of annoyed, right? Yeah.
so I really appreciate just what you're doing to, like we are you read report after report, like people are so lonely nowadays. So how can we combat that as community? Well, what is community? Not just we all occupy this building for an hour a week, but like I look at you face to face. I ask you questions. I work out things with you, and I think that's really cool. So.
And we have to find a way to do that sort of scalably, right? Because you can't know 300 people intimately. You shouldn't be expected to. It's not possible. How many people did Jesus have in his inner circle? No, 3, right? Peter, James, and John were the inner circle. And then you expand out to the 12, maybe 16 if we count the women. Right? So he had a group of about 15 or 16 people that he was with on a regular basis, into whom he most directly ministered, and then he sent them out to minister to their own groups, in groups of pairs, 72 groups, or as the 12, they went out and did this, right? So human psychology is Jesus's psychology. Luke Thompson is a professor at MLC who does a great presentation on this and shows like the number of close relationships you can meaningfully have is less than 5. The number of secondary close relationships you can meaningfully have is less than 15. So we're just like, it's an attempt to intentionalize that model, and then to say to people whose experience with church has largely been anonymous, that that's not what's happening here. And sometimes that's a turnoff, right? Sometimes people want like just a room they can walk into and walk out of, and I don't have to talk to anybody. Like, I understand the desire for that. That's tough.
Context to understand too, because it's so different, and this is something growing up is the kind of traditional church model that I've had to work my way through, is that Seattle is not just post-Christian, it is post-Christian. So people, young people in particularly that we interact with, have had no interaction with the Christian church other than the political stage. Right, and what they've seen on the political stage. So they have no understanding of what we're talking about or what Christianity at its core is truly about. And so gathering in this house church model, which I like when people ask me what it's like, who have experience with church. And I say that that's the way to think about it. Early Christian church, where you're going out into a mission field where people either have no possibility or no context of Christianity, or one that might have some baggage tied along to it. So kind of backing it back up into these small groups where, and at this point, Kent is still very much involved with the small groups that we run, just because they are so young and still need that guidance. But for the people who do have experience with church, or maybe come from that traditional, more traditional context of church, the way that we look at it is that there are places for them, right? There are Wells churches, there are Lutheran churches that are serving them in a way that best serves where they're at right now. But for the people who don't, those that are engaging in that, who are a part or find themselves a part of post-Christianity, this is the way that we found the most accessible way of getting to connect them with people who understand who God is and why God loves them, first and foremost.
Yeah, to add to that, if you didn't hear me say it before, that's my wife. She's part of our church. She does this stuff with us all the time. One thing I heard you say that I want to bring out is to say this is not an either-or model of ministry. It's not like Elum is saying the old way of doing church is bad and this is the new good way. Like, not the case at all. The church is huge and diverse, and it always will be, and it always should be, right? It's like how it is in any church. Like 25% of what happens here at Messiah is going to like hit you right between the eyes and be the thing you love the most. And then 50% of what happens outside of that 25% is going to be like, fine, I'm okay with that. And then there's going to be that last 25% that's not for you and you don't really like it, but it reminds you you're part of a diverse body, of a bigger thing than yourself, and it's good to be part of a bigger thing than yourself. Like, that's beneficial. So that's one piece to highlight from that. The other one is that post-Christian and post-Christian definition. Post-Christian society is somewhat anti-church, right? So it's saying we do not need this. We are coming out of Christian society. Seattle, we're finding, is sort of post-Christian. They're more ambivalent about it than anti. My son goes to a private school that is not a Christian private school. And after the attacks on Israel on October 7th, they sent out a wonderful email about how to talk to young children about traumatic world events, right, and how to do this. And they had some links to articles that could be helpful. One of those links was a straight-up Christian link. Like, they were fine with including that, right? Like, it was just that it was a good resource. It was beneficial. They had no problem with it. They're not anti it. They're just not exclusive to it. So being in this situation where we can say to people who aren't necessarily antithetical to Christianity, but do have an issue maybe with something from their past or whatever, like, just come be with people, just with friends. Like, let's just talk about this. We find this right now to be a beneficial position to put ourselves in as we seek to minister to more folks. Yes?
How are you selecting the leaders of your small groups, and about how many small groups do you have right now?
Right now I have 4 small groups. I lead all of them, but there are 5 key roles that we think every small group should have, and we're working on putting people into those. So there's a facilitator role, which is the role that, like, just makes sure we're scrolling down and we're keeping going. Doesn't have to be a teacher, doesn't have to be a theologian or anything. There's a host. The host makes sure the seats are comfortable, the food is hot, the drinks are cold, all that. There's an includer role, like, is someone being left out, or is someone over-dominating? Like, that person has to be pretty bold. Like, they have to be adept at, like, the side conversation later. Hey, I really appreciated the story you shared, but the last 4 weeks you've shared a pretty long story, and I have a feeling that people are starting to feel unincluded, so can we adjust that or whatever, right? And then there's 2 that are kind of complementary. One is a taskmaster. They make sure that the people know what the people need to know about being involved with Elum, and the other is the reporter, who makes sure Elum needs to know what it needs to know to serve the people in the groups as well as possible. We are building ways to train people, like little courses that will train people into each of those roles, and generally it's identify somebody in a group it's like, well, I think you'd make a great host, so let's talk about what a host looks like, and let's get you into that kind of a role.
Is the goal to eventually have, like, members that are leading
The dream would be for it to be scalable, right? Where I would be leading all of our new people all the time as we integrate them and I become their pastor and they learn my voice, which is always in the spotlights. But then the groups are just like, let's have 150 groups, and I can't lead 150. Like we had 8 groups last August. We consolidated a little bit over the course of the new year, and 8 was too many for me to be leading every single week. Like that was 90 minutes, 8 times. It was a lot. So it has to be scalable. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Can we show our appreciation for Kent coming by today?
Thanks for having me.
All right. And I'm sure he'll be around for a little bit after church if you want to expand on anything or ask some questions, but we'll also get to hear him share God's word with us here in just a little bit. So refill your coffee, say hi to somebody, and we'll be back at it in 15 minutes.